I think, well, first of all, I think people like the simplicity of a good framework, and you can choose. The key is to make it unique to you. Just don't go around and, I don't know, copy Simon Sinek's Golden Circles or, the Boston Matrix two by two. Like two by twos are very good.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Book More Show. It's Stuart Bell here, and today joined by my good friend Roger Jones. Roger, how's it going, buddy?
It's going really well, thank you, and I'm really pleased to be on the show today. Thank you for inviting me, Stuart.
Pleasure. I'm excited as always. There's a bit of a two ends of the spectrum when we're doing shows. It's either people who I haven't spoken to before or people who I know quite well, and you I know quite well. So this is going to be an interesting one. I think we'll go deep into your business, probably a bit deeper than I do with some other people because I know the background a little bit more. So for the sake of everyone else, why don't we do the quick intro and share with everyone the kind of Roger Jones story?
Okay, well, the Roger Jones story in summary is I was a corporate consultant. Well, I used to have a corporate executive role, got a bit bored doing that, I must confess, and decided to take the entrepreneurial route. I became a very unsuccessful consultant for a few years until I worked out what someone should do to be a successful consultant. And then after I turned my business around, I did the things that consultants should do. I got published in Harvard Business Review, wrote things in knowledgeable articles, and I focused on helping CEOs, particularly new CEOs in their roles and in top teams. But then during the last 5, 6 years of that, solo consultants, coaches started to ask me, well, Roger, how do you get in to see chief executives of big companies so, relatively easily? How do you charge premium fees? And I happily shared that knowledge. And so in 2020, which was, that famous
Perfect
lockdown year,
timing. Yeah.
I decided to pivot my business and focus on helping solo consultants, executive coaches build a trusted pipeline and become the recognized authority in their market with zero selling. So I've got two groups of clients now. Those who are like me in the beginning, they've just left the corporate world and they want to set up on their own. So I guide them through a formula to do that. And those who have had their business for a few years, or they may have had their business for a couple of decades and want a complete refresh of their business and to be more successful. Avoid that. What I always remember and would never really talk about to clients for sure was feast and famine, because in front of a client, you always had to look confident and successful. And I'd be thinking, oh God, I hope they say yes, because I was thinking about my bank balance, particularly in the early years. So the main thing I do is I aim to help clients have less stress in their life by getting rid of that frustration.
Yeah. It's such a common story, I think, isn't it? So that transition from the job to going solo, how much of a crossover was there in what you were doing before to when you stepped out by yourself? Was that very clearly the same group of people, or was it a loose crossover, but some transferable skills?
Oh no, I did everything the wrong way totally. I would take what I did in my early years, do the opposite, and you'd be successful. I was living in Spain and working internationally around the world for 5, 6 years, not long before I set up. I moved back to London, and I had no real network here. So that's not a way to start a business. So I started with no
I mean, it's
network.
all in, sink or
Yeah,
swim.
it's all in. And okay, fine. I didn't have responsibilities. I didn't have children, and I wasn't living. Coming back, I didn't have a big mortgage or things like that. So I wasn't taking huge risks on a family, but I was taking a bit of a business risk. And I
Yeah.
can certainly remember in the early years, looking at the job adverts, which were still in newspapers at that time, thinking, oh, should I apply for that? Should I update my
Yeah.
resume, my CV for that?
It's
So
so funny. You
yeah.
mentioned that. So I had the same experience, like going from a corporate job, which was, I mean, we're a professional team and relatively high performing, but somewhat relaxed because we all knew what we were doing into the stress of being out by yourself. And for the next 3 years, you're getting very large, agencies reaching out with what then was relatively large salaries, think kind of tempt you back and tempt you back. And it's, I think once that switch is flipped in your head, it would be difficult to go back, I imagine. But yeah, as a reminder of what's behind the other door, it's there in your face all the time.
What totally, and particularly, I'm sure you probably experienced the same. You had friends who were in their corporate jobs, having that nice steady salary, having the bonus and things like that, and you're thinking, well, I hope I get this piece of work and it's not that big.
Yeah, yeah.
Back to your original question, was there a transfer in sort of expertise
Mm,
to what I started off doing? There was, but as I sort of recommend to clients, or my clients now, your clients don't want your expertise. They do, but they don't. They want a problem solved. It's a bit like you when I came to you to have the book published. I had a problem and you helped me with that problem to get my
right.
message out into the world. So you've got to be far more problem focused in your approach to looking at clients and looking at what value you can deliver to clients.
It's actually interesting, isn't it? When you think about that in terms of the specific deliverables, it's easy, particularly I think in a consulting role rather than something that's very product focused, like a HVAC engineer or someone who's going into to build a fence. I'm just looking out the window and our fence has got some wind damage, so I need to sort that out. But yeah, building something where there's a specific set of deliverables, very scope constrained, as a consultant, it can really be quite big and broad, and you can get into kind of flim-flammy type words and miss on those very specific deliverables. So that advice of being very outcomes oriented and really tie in what you're able to do and deliver, yeah, that really resonates as making sense. And from the book perspective, it's easy from that principle because the book is the outcome. There's many other things that could come downstream, but the book is the book. This is the thing. When you were moving from going through that pain and working out the pieces that do work and refining those, we'll get into the book specifically in a moment, which does bring together a number of those pieces into the framework. But as you were going through that, was it obvious the pieces that did work that became the framework? Or was it only kind of in retrospect, a couple of years later, then the pieces started to fall together into a framework? How structured was that framework?
It was unstructured, well, totally unstructured to start off with, because
Yeah.
I was coming from a corporate environment where I was sort of a corporate marketeer, business developer. And if you're a corporate marketeer, it really doesn't align with that of an entrepreneurial marketing as such. So it took a bit of time to sink in. So what I did do start off with, I did, in those early days when it truly was feast and famine, I actually started to look at what successful professionals were doing and what were they doing in that sort of that early part of the journey. And I did reach out to a few of them, and a few of them were very kind and had a chat with me and gave me some mentoring advice. And
Oh,
that was
nice.
really helpful to just get a view. And I can just remember one of them just saying, the key thing is mindset, which it clearly is. You need to change from that corporate mindset where, you know, you got a sense of identity in your job. Everything's dished out to you each week. What your work is, what you're going to be doing, to more, to an entrepreneurial mindset, which I really hadn't thought of. And it was all about, someone saying, focus on the problem that you're delivering. And on that note of, you know, being the entrepreneur, it was only then, I I really sort of switched what I was doing, sort of how I was seeing that feast and famine, thinking about opportunities I could go for rather than just sort of sitting down feeling a bit down or what am I going to do next.
Right.
It gave me a bit of drive to do things.
It's kind of like that E-Myth problem of moving from the kind of professional expert out to start by yourself. There's all of the unexpected elements that kind of can throw you off center. So anything around a framework that helps people give them some steps and something tangible that they can do, whether it's the E-Myth in terms of kind of those initial steps or the trusted framework that we're talking about here. What I love about frameworks is it just gives those, well, two things, I guess. One is for readers, it gives people a very kind of formulaic or roadmap way of thinking about things. So as someone's reading something for the first time and really trying to get onto those anchor points that they can jump their thinking from one step to the next, it helps from that perspective. And then from the writing perspective as well, it just makes it so much easier to create because it gives you that natural scope constraint because it reflects a framework that you've already got. So why don't we talk about the book particularly then? So the trusted advisor, tell me a little bit about the genesis of the idea for the information, for the content, and then we can talk about how we actually created it because that was a little bit different this time around as well.
Yeah, no, it certainly was. And it was great to do that. I look forward to talking about that in a few minutes. So, the book, how did it evolve? Well, first of all, how did the structure of the book evolve? I developed a program for entrepreneurs, solo consultants, solo coaches to actually to start that journey to become recognized authorities in their markets. So it's going around what you could call the basic elements, how to remove your competition, how to stop being perceived as a commodity, and how to feel more confident in your growth. So I had that as a 9 module program, and I still have it. I've played around with the titles of a few of the modules since working with you and other team members in the program.
Right.
So that was the basis and the framework for the book. And you so rightly say it just made things a lot simpler to have a framework. And I think having a visual framework is something I touch on in the book, The Trusted Pipeline, just helps so much. It helps not just in book writing, but if you're with a client, if you can almost it's almost telling a visual story of the problems that there are in the market, how they can be solved. And if you do it in a visual manner, and if you can actually draw your visual model in front of a client, you're literally drawing them in as you're
Right.
drawing the model. And
Yeah.
most people write a value proposition or a positioning statement.
Paragraphs of text they expect people to
Yeah,
trawl through.
and sent people off to sleep, basically, I think. If you could do it visually, you got far more of a chance of engaging people. So the genesis of the idea of the book came from the program. Interesting, the title, which we did test, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a few moments, that process. We tested a number of titles, but the title ended up with The Trusted Pipeline is something a client said to me, or what was it, probably 2 years ago when I first had that first initial sort of strategy session with them. And they
Right.
said, well, I really need in my business is a trusted pipeline. I thought, oh, that's a great name.
Yeah.
However, she is a testimonial in the book, and I have told her she's aware that
Right. There was no
I tell
trademark
her
implied when she said it.
hopefully not. I'll wait for her lawyers in Germany to come and approach me.
Right. So this is one of the things I try and get across to people a lot. I mean, some people come to us with, I want to write a book and I've got a pretty clear idea of what I want to write about, and then it's just a case of refining it. But I think for the majority of people, whether you're a coach or a consultant in a particular business or a fence builder or a HVAC engineer or a vet or any business type, a florist. We just passed Valentine's Day as we record this. Whatever you've got, there's the opportunity to framework it and just talk about the way that you do things in the particular way that you do them. It doesn't have to be unique. You're not reinventing the wheel. A florist, there's only so many unique things you can do if you're doing a floral arrangement, I would imagine, not my other expertise. But there's only so many variations. But the way that you talk about it and the way that you structure it, and any ability that you've got to diagram it or flowchart it, again, it's just sharing your knowledge in a very accessible way with readers. And when you think about who the readers are, we're trying to start a conversation with potential clients. So with the florist example, we're not necessarily trying to train people how to do it. We're not necessarily trying to give them all of the horticultural background on the flowers and what a difference is, but structuring why a bouquet or a floral arrangement looks good in this way and drawing a triangle because it should be this shape or a rectangle represents this other type of arrangement. Simply putting things that move that conversation forward. I think no matter what business you're in, there's the opportunity to create a framework for you and the way that you do things that will resonate with people and move that conversation on to the next step. Is that what you found as you kind of brought those nine things together? It was easy for people to then see how they all stitched together and what the first jumping off point was and where it led to the next step?
You know, I think that's very true, what you say, because I think, well, first of all, I think people like the simplicity of a good framework, and you can
Yeah.
choose. The key is to make it unique to you. Just don't go around and, I don't know, copy Simon Sinek's Golden Circles or, the Boston Matrix two by two. Like two by twos are very good.
Right.
But yeah, it does. I think also the key thing, people love a process. They like to know that they're starting at this point and they're going to end up over here. And if
Yeah.
you can show them diagrammatically what that process is and how their business can transform along the route and those major milestones, that's basically what you're doing in a formula. So with mine, I called it the recognized authority formula. There are three key, I use a triangle. There are three key elements of it, and each of those three key elements is divided into three. So there's nine, and that represents the nine chapters in the
Right.
book. So it slowly builds to that.
Yeah.
So, I think that if you're thinking about starting or creating your own visual representation of what you do, I think one of the useful things is to start thinking about the problems that your clients face. So
Right.
just literally brainstorm them and write them all down. The problems clearly that you can solve, but then categorize them in two, three, four max. Three is absolutely ideal. And they could be the three major problems, and then there's probably subsets of those, and that can be the basis of a framework. So I've
Yeah.
had clients use a mountain very effectively. They were into more the outdoor leadership. I've had someone who's into scale ups of tech firms use a rocket and it works really well
Right.
for the proposition they have. I've had a lawyer use something a bit more complex. We actually simplified it. I think it was complex law, but we managed to simplify what they were doing as well. So the key is, make it unique, be creative. So take off the sort of that normal logical consultants or coaches hat and be creative and get a form that feels natural for you and
Yeah.
something that feels unique to you in form, even if so as you so rightly say, what they're actually doing isn't maybe tremendously different to someone else, but you can
That
make the
unique.
form of it quite original.
And that's actually a great way of thinking about it, which I don't think I've thought about before. The idea that the information is the same, but the way that you share it and what you anchor it to. Actually, we did a podcast with someone a couple of months ago where we were talking. They were an Ironman triathlete, a female in, I think the over 40s category, but was an Ironman triathlete and had been semi-professionally, I think, before. So her whole framework was anchored around some of those training principles from Ironman, and the language that
Mm,
she used described it in that language. And again, not that the fundamentals were particularly unique or different from anything else, but the positioning and the anchor points and the passion at which she could talk about it and the descriptive elements to kind of illustrate it, all of that, because it was a subject she was passionate about, all of that helped again start this conversation in an interesting way, in a way that kind of stands out in someone's head. I think as well, actually, which is often overlooked, it's this idea of how best to describe it, kind of the commitment threshold of the reader. If they're entering into a conversation with you and it's a very unknown end point, it's okay, well, let's start doing some work or let's start doing a program. And at some point, somewhere, maybe something will happen, but it could be
mm.
1 week or 10 years. That brings up some anxiety. But if people can clearly see, okay, here are the steps, and I can rightly or wrongly assign a period of time to each of those steps, so there's a known end point. I think that also removes some of that friction and helps people jump on the phone to start the conversation because they can see or get a feel at least for where it's going to end, which I think that helps a lot.
They can see that transformation that's going to happen, and they know that in whatever it is you're doing, that consultancy project, that coaching project, whatever your area of expertise is, whatever your professional service is, they can see the beginning. They can see these, let's say, these mini transformations along the route to get to the end point, because that's what
Right.
people want. They want the end point, and they know the time as well. So you can make it time defined as well. So I have a 90-day program. You can always also say the outcomes within that framework you're going to get. So I guarantee that my clients are going to meet 7 to 10 of their ideal corporate C-level decision makers, whether they're chief execs or another C-level title. So you can frame everything within the model, which is I think a reassurance for people as well.
Yeah,
Plus, you can also be a little bit creative. Although what you do may not be totally unique, you can call elements of your model, or you can give names to elements of your model to make them sound unique and create some intrigue. So in my model, I have one section called Insight Authority. So people think, oh, what's Insight Authority? Tell me more about that. And I have another called Market Echo. So, what's all that about? Why is that relevant? So it tends to spark the conversation. So you can
yeah,
be creative as you produce it.
yeah.
And the other thing, when you create one, it will evolve over time. So whatever you create on day one with client feedback, customer feedback, it will change. It
That
will
actually
change and
evolving over
evolve in
time.
a good way.
Right, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, you get feedback from actual clients, and that is hugely valuable. I mean, the whole benefit of, or one of the big benefits of conversation starting book approach rather than a traditional book is that you're really trying to create something, get it out there and get feedback and iterate on it rather than put all your eggs in one basket and spend all the time and money on something that you hope is successful and publish it in a traditional sense, having something that's much more lean and iterative. The purpose is to start a conversation and not to have words printed on dead trees. Again, it just makes it much more dynamic. That's probably a good bridge into the way that we're testing yours. So for your book, we had a cohort earlier last year where we were doing some testing first with a good friend of ours, Andrew James from Cerebro. So they run, for everyone else, they run a ad testing platform and have a very comprehensive analytics tool in the background that picks up on sentiment. So rather than writing the book in this efficient way and getting it out there and then waiting for feedback, we actually, with you and this group, tested first. So we tested the title and the chapter titles to see which of those words resonated, and then the content was still broadly the same, but it was these kind of anchor labels of the titles that changed. So let's talk a little bit about that process, because there were a few options that we tested, and we were testing on LinkedIn, I think primarily with you, but talk a little bit about
Mm.
let's start with the book title, how that evolved.
Well, I start with the book title, and then the title and the sort of the subtitle, and then we can go down to sort of parts of the model, which are my chapter titles as well. So with the title, I had a number that I thought would work. Unfortunately, my favorite did work there. I think that was my only favorite that worked, actually. One other worked as well. The others I edited. So literally, we put ads on LinkedIn. My market, although I'm based here in London and the UK, my market is my clients are in the States, North America. So the LinkedIn ads were targeted over there. And it was simply getting responses to the various titles I had.
Right.
And that was how we sort of calibrated and prioritized them. So with the title, I was quite pleased. It came out as my favorite. The subtitle did as well. And there was also the bit on the subtitle, the subtitle is how you can become the recognized authority in your market, which we tested at various iterations of that. And then there was a without selling, without, I don't know, without hawking your wares, various options after that. And the without selling proved to be the most popular, which in some ways was surprising, but in some ways suits my program, because in my program you do zero selling to C-level execs to actually get the appointments and the meetings with them, the conversation flow, as I called it. And then from that point, as I say, we went to the chapter titles, which are points around my model. And I can't, the first one part of my model is mindset, because if you start out on your own, the most important thing is actually adapting your mindset to the new reality of, not having that corporate structure, to being an entrepreneur. and I cannot remember exactly what it was. I think it was something like mindset, something like solid mindset, something like this. But the one that came out was future proof,
Right.
was the most popular. I had one on, I called it before precise problem, something like that, and it was focus profit and focus profit. That's the second chapter. Totally different to what I had before. Was all about finding the acute problem you solve or how you do it, identifying your personal, your professional genius and aligning it with the problem and the market need. So that
Right.
came out as focus profit. So we went through this process, which took a number of weeks. It wasn't unduly expensive, but it's worthwhile doing because I now know that the model I have actually aligns with what my clients click into
Yeah.
most readily. So there were, as I say, there were a few surprises en route.
And that's the
Um,
really interesting thing about actually testing is it gives you very specific feedback on who that target audience is. So again, just to dive into it in a little bit more detail so people can think about it, not that this is the right fit for everyone, this testing, but just to think about it conceptually, because I think the idea is useful whether you actually test or not. But it's this idea of selecting the audience type, the avatar that you're going to run the ads to. So, of all of the people out there, LinkedIn is a great professional channel because you can tie it into jobs and roles and interests that way around. Facebook is a great channel geographically. You could test in what people respond to in Florida is probably going to be somewhat different from what they respond to in Oregon. So picking that audience of your ideal candidates, and then within the group of ads, just testing the different words. The meaning is still the same, the chapter is still the same. You're not rewriting the whole thing as something completely different. It's just whether people respond to future problems versus problem aware or the other tests that were in there. So I really love this idea. In the book blueprint scorecard, we really talk about this idea of using the language of understanding the who you're writing the book for and using their language. So from a non-testing perspective, we make suggestions of reaching out to the support team or looking back through support emails and see the words that are clicked on there, going to Google and doing the autocomplete thing in Google and seeing what people are typically searching for and the words they use. But this whole idea of you've got a framework, you know what you ultimately want them to need them to do, you know what the problems are because you've been in the industry for a while, but just the semantics of whether it's this word or that word, testing is such a great way of getting some real world feedback on which words resonate.
no, totally so. And I think, building on what you're saying, really understanding your avatar and how to find them. Because
Right.
sure, I use LinkedIn. I'm not you know, I'm active, but I'm not there every 5 minutes, as it were. But understanding how you can sort of really break things down into groups, into geographies, into interests, into experiences was really helpful. And it's also helpful now in follow-up advertising on the
Right.
platform as well. But you're right, there's other platforms. I know someone else in the group was more into Facebook, which was more appropriate for their book. I know someone else was also also into LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
it's whatever, well, it's wherever you're going to find your ideal clients. That's the
Yeah.
key. It could be Facebook, could be LinkedIn. And I'm sure it can be both of them, but you probably don't need to, well, not you probably don't, you don't need to use every platform to do the testing,
Yeah.
provided you get enough
Specialize on one.
responses. And you're not
Right.
looking for something that's completely statistically accurate. You're looking for sort of key trends and
The indication. Right.
yeah, key indication, but be prepared to chuck out those titles you've fallen in love with
Right.
because the market knows better than you do,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, and that's actually an interesting point as well. I mean, it's easy to you can justify yourself or convince yourself of anything sat in an isolated bubble in the office by yourself with a pen and paper. You can justify either any answer, but actually to have empirical data coming back that is, this is what actually clicked through, it makes it harder to justify a decision that didn't test well, regardless of what your personal opinion is to begin with.
Yeah, and also one thing we didn't mention, we tested titles and words. We can also test the cover as well. which
Right.
was really interesting to see what covers were, or what colors, what sort of even fonts and positioning of text, background color. And there was clear difference as we went through. And put it up here, you're not going to see it, but that was the final winner, which
Yeah.
in some ways surprised me. But hey ho, it worked. That's what the target market particularly liked.
Actually,
And I
that's such
know
a great,
Andrew James was really going more precisely on even shades of color for one of
right.
his books. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that's a great point as well, because it's not only split testing ads. I mean, there's a whole industry around microscopically split testing absolutely everything. And Facebook, and to a lesser degree, LinkedIn, but Facebook particularly, I think a lot of people have got familiarization with. 10 years ago, you could pick any number of individual elements and do it yourself. But now they really increasingly just want you to give them $10 and they'll find the right people for you, because the breadth and scope of their algorithm is so much more than we can comprehend as individuals just trying to do all of those tests. So I think testing some of the variables that we're talking about can seem a little bit intimidating, because it's an ever-ending hole of statistically significant numbers. But that's not what we're doing. We're talking about option one is, with your own experience, stick a finger in the air and pick something. Or option two, spend a little bit of budget on testing and get some real world feedback. It's not that we're trying to test with millions of impressions and thousands of different variations. It's just a reasonably small amount of effort to get a reasonably better version one outcome, rather than just a finger in the air, which your finger in the air is probably better than someone else's within your own area of expertise. But if you can just take that extra step and test a little and get those indications, again, we're not writing a traditional book. We're not carving it in stone. We can make changes at any point in the future. If we've got, this is our first avatar, our first group that we're going afterwards, but then maybe there's a second group, and testing in North America, the purple and yellow colors or the blue and yellow colors worked well. Maybe the next test would be into the UK or into France, well, maybe not France, but into Spain. And that's a yes, minister joke there. So, but yeah, so testing to a different avatar, these things are easily tweakable. So again, it's all incremental changes and small amounts of additional effort that we can do just to move that needle in small percentages, rather than the big, huge win of one thing that makes a difference, which I imagine is reflected actually in the content of your book. You're talking about 9 incremental levers that can be pulled. It's not just one magic trick that changes absolutely everything.
Everything you're right is an incremental change with a few transformations along the route. So
Right.
yeah, but what you say is so true. It is getting that feedback and then allowing you then to put the book together so relatively easily. And that's the one thing that, sort of thinking back to the process, that I was so pleasantly surprised with, was actually to put the book together, which is whatever it is, I don't know, 9, 10,000 words in here. Well, it takes 90 minutes to read, I presume. I think it does. It literally took an hour and a half, 2 hours to actually dictate it. I didn't have to write it. Obviously, after that process, there was editing
But so
to,
much easier to edit something rather than
well,
stare at a blank
yeah,
page.
rather than, yeah,
Yeah.
start afresh. And because, okay, I'm a Brit, and Brits are traditionally really slow typists. About one word every 2 weeks I get a word out. But to do it by dictation was just so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, I say it took 2 hours, but it took quite a bit of prep time to put the bullets down, know
Yeah.
what I was going to cover. And then the other key thing, I think, the other thing, because the bottom line for the book is to generate leads for the book. It's to add value to those who read it, so they get something, they understand a process that they can follow. There's usable information they can implement in their businesses. However, I want leads as well, good
Right.
quality leads. So, having the freedom to put testimonials in there at the right place, bring things to life with, real life case stories of clients, whether those clients are in the States, in Brazil, across Europe, Australia, or Middle East. Brings, for me, because I know the key target is the States. I also have clients sprinkled around the world. you can bring that dimension in as well. But I really was pleasantly surprised with the to get version one out. I thought would be not like pulling teeth. That's not the right expression, but a lot more.
What's
Basically,
slower and more painful?
well, exactly the thing most of us try and avoid, which is hard work sitting down at keyboard, and it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
what
was
I really like. The model that sharing with people now, the example that the to get people to think about writing something in a different way. Because whenever you say book, people have an expectation or an image in their mind of a traditional book. Because for all of our life, that's what when you say book, that's what you see. Something like is on the shelf behind you there. And that's the benefit that we have as having authored an idea and given it to someone. The recipient also sees it as book and never ever throws away a book as opposed to a business card or other marketing material that gets ends up in the trash most of the time. But the thing that trips us up is that when we think about then writing or creating, we also think about the traditional route, which is doing some homework, giving it to a teacher, getting it handed back with some red marks, or at least that was my experience for the most part, and then sometimes having to, or oftentimes having to do it again. Whereas that's not the case. What we're talking about here is effectively a written version of a presentation. And I think for the vast majority of business owners, if you were invited to speak in front of a room of 100 ideal clients next week, we could sit down today, outline some slides, give it some bullets, make the story of that presentation easy to understand, give people a motivation that there's a next step at the end of the talk. And then if on the day we were to sit down and interview you to that outline to help you bring out all of the talking points to make sure that you covered it in the way that you wanted to cover it, then for most people that's very accessible as opposed to giving them the job of, okay, now go away and write down those same 10,000 words by starting looking at a blank page. So yeah, this presentation approach to capture the content is a much easier way, I think, of thinking about it.
and if I could add sort of one for me, what's important element to add to that, as I was dictating, I felt I was talking, and hopefully that style comes across in the book. So it's not me having a conversation with the reader, but it's not a formal business book style. You can see lots of business books behind me,
Right.
probably mostly unread. But however,
That's the key.
lots of them aren't necessarily in such an accessible style. And I think if you do dictate a book, it's going to come out more in your style of words,
Yeah,
your style of rhythm of conversation as
yeah.
well, and your language too, because you've probably got ways
The
you
way to say
talk,
it. Yeah.
and that those elements I think as well.
Yeah, exactly. That fingerprint and that connection that someone feels with you, because like we say all the time, the job of work isn't to sell books and make money from the cover price of a book. It's to get into a conversation with the perfect client. And if someone can have had that first experience with you, that then translates into that conversation. And as you're actually talking to them, you're using the same phrases and tones and examples that they've already read. It's a stacking effect in terms of the credibility and the memory that they've got and the belief that they're already in the same place. The job of work of the book is to get to the conversation. The conversation is the important thing. And if the conversational style of the book reinforces that conversation in person, then again, it's another point of amplification rather than writing some cold and technical and traditional, which doesn't really communicate any of that.
No, totally, because as you're so rightly indicating, I think if someone feels they know you before they meet you,
Right.
that's that you sort of melt away that initial getting to know you element. And
Yeah.
I think, there's other ways to do it as well. You can, post on LinkedIn, you can do loads of videos on YouTube, all good things to do.
Podcast.
But I think if someone actually reads a book and has it accessible and can actually read it in 90 minutes,
Yeah.
they're going to get to know you, simply reading about the author. So you're coming off the page. You're not just this whoever you are, corporate freelancer, corporate consultant, there's a bit of life, there's a bit of depth to you within there
Yeah.
as well. They understand your thinking, they understand the types of clients you work with. And there's probably been, as they've read the book, or hopefully there's been a series of mini light bulb moments for them as they went through the pages.
Yeah.
So I think that all these, key elements, as you're indicating, are so vital when you're building up a relationship. And it does, from the conversations I've had with those who have had the book and hopefully they've read it, I'm pretty sure they have read it afterwards. That certainly is true
Yeah.
as a result.
That follow up afterwards, I mean, the opportunities, people often say, okay, I've got this material, I've got these additional things I want to put in the book. And sometimes that's the right answer. But oftentimes it's people would be better served by using those pieces in the follow up rather than in the book itself. So I think yours is a perfect example of the size of the book is perfect to introduce the 9 elements of the framework. It introduces it in a way that's accessible and easily read within a reasonable period of time. But you've also now got the opportunity to, as someone joins the list on day one, over the next months into years of following up with them with
Hmm.
regular additional supporting material that all falls within one of those 9 elements, there is always then an opportunity to ask people, hey, it's today the day, you ready to raise your hand? It just anchors it back to that initial piece, but it keeps the conversation going over the long run.
Yeah, you're right. It anchors it back, keeps the conversation going. And what I also liked was your idea, which I've put in the book, which is on the back cover, where there's 3 steps that people can follow up with. Just one of them simply to watch some videos. So they go to my website, rogerejones.com/watch, and they discover the story of the book. They can then find out where they are on their journey by completing a scorecard by going to Roger E. Jones/scorecard and
Right.
get some personal feedback. And then obviously once they've done that, hopefully there's a temptation then, if they feel it's going to be of benefit, they can have a conversation with me and have a call. So I think those 3 elements of follow-up are important. In fact, just before, we got on Zoom for this podcast, I noticed an email come in that someone who I know had recently received the book had actually completed the scorecard. So it
Right.
does work. But you are
Yeah.
right, as Dean says, there's going to be a small percentage of people who want to sort of buy now. So, the majority, not saying that they're not lurkers, they're not, it's just not
It's
right
just
for them
today's
the
not the
time.
day.
Yeah, it could be many reasons. So they could come in a month, they could come in 6 months, they could
Yeah.
come in a year. I've had people, I had one after my weekly newsletter this Sunday say, I'd like to have a conversation with you, Roger. And I thought, yeah, sort of vaguely recognized the name because I'm sure I've seen it before. But then when I looked at my CRM, he joined my world 2.5 years ago and has just been around. So you just
Yeah.
don't know when it's the right time for that person.
Yeah. Past podcasts, there's endless stories of people purging lists only to find clients jumping or potential clients jumping through hoops to try and get back in touch with people because they thought, oh, dead leads purged the list. Or, I mean, even with us, we've been doing this for 11 years now, and there's people who've joined our list right back in the beginning, whereas they've just finally got around to it now for whatever reason. And I'm sure if you'd have asked them when they joined the list in the first place, when do you think you're going to do this? None of them would have said, oh, well, give me 7 years and I'll get round to it. I mean, everyone thinks it's tomorrow, but it's surprising how much life gets in the way and just a year disappears. Yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
totally. And I'm sure, I've done the same with things I've
right.
done,
That's the
and
funny
maybe
thing,
you've
isn't it?
done the same too. It
It's
just hasn't
exactly the
been the
same with
right time.
books on the shelf behind you. There's no way you bought any of those books thinking, oh, this the gold on the end there will go red, will go nice with the red on the right. So I'm going to buy it because it's gold. You buy it because you want the information, but then life gets in the way and something happens. It's the amount of times that where if you check your Amazon, or maybe mine at least, check your Amazon cart and the number of things that are saved to later, sometimes I'll go back through and I can't even remember why I put that in there in the first place. But I had some reason at some point. And then the other side end of the spectrum, when I'm looking for something, oh, actually, it's been in the shopping cart for months. I just hadn't got around to buying it. So the likelihood of, or the thing that needs to happen in order for someone to execute is intention and timing, and both of them need to match. And you can do something around the intention and share with people useful information that tells them you're the right person, but you can't do anything about the timing, and you just have to be there regularly enough so that when timing is right, hopefully it intersects with something that you've recently sent them, like the newsletter. Time always flies on the podcast. I think I say it every show. One thing that I did want to quickly touch on, though, and I don't know that you've had opportunity to do it yet because the book's only recently finished, but one of the things that we were talking about, we often talk about the idea of using it as digital lead generation, so on the website or in an ad, and allow people to sign in for a digital version. But we were talking about using the physical versions as well to go out to that selected group of people, the visible prospects rather than the invisible prospects. Have you done anything yet with the physical versions of the book?
Well, yeah, you can't see here, but on the floor of my office, I got two boxes of a box of books and a
Yeah,
box of envelopes. I have been
fantastic.
sending them out. So what I did, and again, you're right, it's only recently been launched. So I'm doing some experimentation at the moment. So I've done it with some warmer potential clients, and I've also done it with some colder potential clients, i.e., they're new connections on LinkedIn. And I said, then I sent them another message, a day later. Would you like a copy? It may be of value to you. And a percentage of people said yes, and I've sent them off. And one piece of business has come from it. So
I mean,
that was in the first batch of, I think the first batch was 24. So if you do an ROI on what the book costs to buy from Amazon,
yeah,
postage to the States, I think the total is about £8 each, £8 each. Do
yeah,
that for 20, that's sort of, I don't know, whatever 20 times eight is. That's a pretty good ROI.
yeah.
So,
And that's on the immediate return. The long-term return of those people who've received the physical copies and the relationship status, the intention is increased a little bit. But again, it's just the timing that's off. I mean, the ROI can only go up, it can't go down. Who else is physically, which other author out there is physically mailing a copy of the book saying, I really think you'll get some value of that, more than happy to send you a copy? Like, no one else is doing that.
and I don't know about you, but although I love all the digital stuff, I lose things on my laptop, or I think, oh,
Right,
I'm not going to get around to that. But if you've got
right.
something, you can hold in your hands and
Yeah,
you can just put it down, you visually see it. So I
yeah,
think to have a physical copy that you then mail out, it's always around. And maybe nothing's going to happen with some of them, which is fine. But all you need is a couple of them, or a small percentage to come through. And
yeah.
that's a fantastic ROI
And
on
that book is going to live on their shelves and their desks and in their offices for way longer than the email is. So the likelihood of it being stumbled upon or shared or used in a kind of a second and third and fourth tier factor, again, way greater than just the digital version. And again, there's use
Yes,
cases for both, but I really like the physical version for that.
I think, yeah, it's definitely a case for digital versions. Yeah, I've been experimenting, giving those to people who've joined my new LinkedIn newsletter. But I'll see. The statistical sample is too small at the moment to judge, but business has come through from the physical copy, and it's
Yeah,
just so easy to get it, down to the post office and get it sent off. So I'm going
yeah,
to keep this experimentation going,
right.
and we
Circle
need to
back for
compare
sure.
notes when, from others in your ecosystem who have done the same.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely. Are you putting a little note in the book as well when you send it out, or are you just sending it by itself?
yeah, what I do I have any here? I do not immediately have. So what I do is it's actually a yellow post-it,
Okay, yeah,
and I say, I turn to chapter 5, which is here in the book, and
yeah,
on the post-it I write, it would be Stuart, the magic happens in chapter 5. Other thing I do, wait for me for one
there's
moment,
more.
in each book, I've just gone on Canva and I
Okay,
produced
yeah,
cards. That's the cover, and there's a nice sort of endorsement of the book from
yeah,
Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. And on the back, my name, address, contact details. And I write a note here, which would be Stuart. Hope you find value in the book. Let me know what elements of it resonate with you most.
yeah, yeah,
All the best,
perfect.
Roger. So it just makes
Right.
it a bit more personal when
Yeah,
when
again, that's the whole point that we're trying to do. We're trying to start conversations with ideal prospects, and all of these little
Totally.
things are just
Yeah.
elements and levers to kind of increase the likelihood of that conversation starts and starts in a more meaningful way than it would just by running an ad.
Yeah, no, I thought it maybe odd. I just, for folks in the States, I'll just go on Amazon.com and get them to send them out. But, you know,
No,
there's
yeah,
nothing personal about that. To
no,
get
no.
something with you know, you get the head of the Queen on, I said Queen, head of the King on the envelope. I'm living in the
Right.
past. It's a little bit different when it arrives in their mailbox.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Unique. Fantastic. Well, we should definitely circle back in later on in the year and then see how things are going and share some more ideas with people. I want to make sure that people can get a copy of the book there and find out what more about what you're doing. So where's a good place for people to go to find out more about you and what you're up to?
The easiest place is my website, which is Roger E. Jones, ROGEREJONES.com. And that's the place to find out more. And you can find out more about the book when you go there, and you can explore a scorecard there as well to see where
Fantastic.
you are in your business and any tweaks you may need to make.
Yeah, perfect. I highly recommend people checking it out because the book itself is great as well. There's a lot of I think whether you're a consultant, I mean, obviously it's perfectly tuned to that group of people, but I think some of the things that it talks about are universally applicable across all business types. So yeah, well recommend getting a copy of the book just for that alone, whether, as I say, whether or not you're a consultant or in that particular space. I'll make sure, as always, make sure you put those links in the show notes. So as people are listening on the podcast player or in the car, just scroll down and tap the link now and then fill out the details later. So make it super easy for people to get through. Well, time goes fast as always. Let's definitely circle back. Again, just want to say thanks for the time today. Really excited to see the book come together. I love the fact that we got to test some of the things first, but whether or not that's the approach that everyone takes, the fact that the book's out there and it's easily updatable from that real world feedback, you get an actually conversations with real people going on. Yeah, it makes such a big difference. So thanks again, Roger.
Thank you, Stuart. I really enjoyed our time together this afternoon. Much
Fun.
appreciated. Thank you.
Pleasure. Everyone, thanks again for tuning in. We will catch you in the next one. In the meantime, we mentioned the testing approach to some of the summaries. We do run cohorts every so often for that approach. So if you're particularly interested in testing a book first, then just reach out to me, Stuart at 90minutebooks.com, and we can follow up with some details and tell you when the next cohort is. All right. Thanks again, and we will catch everyone in the next one.